Welcome to Legal Innovation Spotlight, the podcast that brings you the latest advancements in legal tech and knowledge management. I'm Ted Theodoropoulos, and I connect with the industry's brightest minds to provide you with valuable insights and actionable takeaways. So sit back, relax, and let's dive in. Chad, how are you this morning?
Good, Ted. How are you?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you spending a few minutes with us today. You and I got connected on LinkedIn, and I had a post about Copilot and generating ROI. And in that, I pointed out some things about SharePoint. And then in the comments, we got into a debate that I've been having this debate for close to 15 years. It seems like it's one of the topics that will never go away, and that is SharePoint as a DMS in legal, which we're going to talk about. And I enjoy debating it. I've had Joe Davis on here, who you know, we've debated it. So you and I are going to talk a little bit about that and some Gen AI stuff. But before we get into that, it looks like you've got a long history in legal and have worked with some of the biggest firms and some at the smaller end of the spectrum. Why don't you just give us a quick intro before we jump in?
Sure. So basically, I started with Sherman & Sterling when I was right out of the, I finished my master's and then started my PhD program. And I was looking for a way to use my PhD program, which was in data mining. And so one of my professors said, hey, why don't you go look at law firms across the river? Because I was at Hoboken, Stevens Institute of Technology. I'm like, what do you mean law firms? Aren't they like paper-based? And he said, well, they sit on a lot of data. And from a data mining, machine learning perspective, they'll give you incredible opportunity. And I finished my classes and I was going to work on my thesis, and I said, well, it'll be great, let me go find a job. So I got into Sherman & Sterling, worked there, worked up the ladder, then moved to White & Case, and from White & Case moved to Gibson Dunn, and then from Gibson Dunn moved to Davis Graham & Stubbs here in Denver, Colorado. So I keep telling people when we moved to this side of the country, I keep telling people that I was raised by New York litigators. So, Random Astro taught me how to litigate, and I learned from Ted Woodrow's how to do dispute resolution. So, and I kind of carry the culture with me wherever I go, that, I always ask the question, why, not the what question, because most of our users here ask the what question as being like law firm technologists. And I try to focus more on, why don't you ask me, why are we doing this instead of the what question? But it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah. Well, you've got perspective from, I guess, kind of both ends of the spectrum in terms of law firm size. And why don't we talk first about kind of just a continuation of that thread that was on LinkedIn, and Copilot. So Copilot, we use it. I like it. I find it to be a little clumsy and still evolving. There's some things that it can't do that it should be able to do, and I know Microsoft's working on that. Just a kind of a really quick example, I assign custom categories on my Outlook calendar to every meeting invite. So when I look at my calendar, I can see, for podcasts, for example, have their own color. And, I ask Copilot, summarize my week by category. Copilot can't do that. Copilot wants to create its own categories based on the text, like the title of the meeting and those sorts of things. It can't access those custom categories, at least that I've been able to find out. And I posted in the forums, and I got feedback that that's kind of down the road. That seems like a really basic feature, from the Office graph. So it's not perfect. I don't expect it to be perfect. It's new. I think over time it will be amazing. It's just still early days. So my point on that post was that law firms that are going and doing a wholesale enterprise-wide Copilot license, I have questions about how they're evaluating ROI. And I included a little clip from Jeff Teeper, who's
Mm-hmm.
kind of the godfather of SharePoint at Microsoft. And it was important that they were his words and not mine. He said that the biggest data source for Copilot is SharePoint, and the biggest engagement surface for Copilot is Teams.
Mm-hmm.
Law firms don't keep anything interesting, the big ones anyway, in SharePoint, right? It's HR docs, it's maybe project artifacts. They don't keep work product in SharePoint
Mm-hmm.
for obvious reasons. Well, we're going to talk about that in
Yeah.
kind of the next part of the agenda. But today, the big law firms don't.
Mm-hmm.
And Teams, legal is behind the curve on Teams adoption. They're starting to get there,
Yeah.
but law firms are really just now starting to move, the big ones, to M365 in earnest, right? A lot
Mm-hmm.
of them have at least Exchange in hybrid mode.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them are now starting to move SharePoint, their on-prem SharePoint footprint into SharePoint Online, and that's where we play InfoDash. And one
Yeah.
reason why we've been so busy is because
Mm-hmm.
firms are doing that. But yeah, so how do you view again, I think Copilot in certain circumstances, really, in my opinion, business of law use cases, very useful. So
Mm-hmm.
finance, HR, marketing, all those functions, they have what they need to
Yeah.
use Copilot. But law firms, we still have the data document silo challenge.
Mm-hmm.
How do you view ROI in that circumstance with a firm that would go enterprise wide? Do you think it's there?
It's not there. It's definitely not there. I totally agree with you, especially if you think about, and you're accurate, that if you look at AM 100, AM 200 law firms, that you'll see that many of them are not, they're using traditional, DMS vendors. So that being a separate silo hosted in a different kind of container in a different cloud provider, most likely, it's going to be a while before Microsoft creates the connectors. And I've seen some early demos like a month ago, and they're still in the early design phases that I couldn't even see a live demo, a couple of screenshots, but I think it's going to get there eventually. But I think my fear is not getting there. It's also more than the cost of it, right? Forget about the ROI, because my model is that with law firms, when I go in front of a EC, try to justify something, first question I hear is that who else is doing it, right? And I keep telling them, you cannot be a follower, you cannot be a laggard and still corner the market and make a name out of your, brand and become competitive in the market. If you want to be competitive, you have to take these kind of sometimes some people call it risky approaches and dip your toes in that Copilot lake. But yes, you're right. So the ROI is not there. But I think my point is just like what's I do reverse the other ROI, right? Opposite of ROI. What's CONI, right? Cost of not investing. What's the cost of not investing right now? And I ask that question to every single partner that has impact on our budget where we try to justify these kind of initiatives. So and I think it's going to be a while, and I feel like maybe Microsoft marketed the product much better than they design. I think their engineering team is catching up to their marketing team, which is highly unusual because technology companies usually go technology first, marketing comes around the corner later. But I think they were really ambitious, which they have every reason, by the way. When you look at, I used Copilot, Cloud 3, and then ChatGPT side by side, every day, and I see significant, future. But like you said, unless you hit that major jackpot, right? You're not going to be able to find these valuable nuggets in millions of documents stored in your system. So that's definitely given. But I think my point is that before you even get to the cost and CONI or ROI, whatever, before you get to buying, and I think that's maybe a knee-jerk reaction from most of the law firms saying that, hey, we're AM10 law firm, number 6 or 7, our competition 5 or 4 or 10 is already using it. Why can't we just go get, and I can definitely hear right now that pressure coming from the top management ranks to the CIOs at that firm saying that how come we don't have it? because our neighbor has it and we don't know it. It's the fear of missing out in many ways. But so what happens just like, so you now have knee-jerk reaction, like you have a reactive approach and you say, you know what, what's the big deal? We'll go buy 1,000 licenses seats for $30. It'll pay itself off. By the way, it will. If you have a attorney charging $500 an hour, it only takes 10 minutes to justify 10 minutes savings for the monthly subscription. I'm not questioning the monthly amount. What I'm questioning with large law firms is that what are you getting out of it, right? Not just the money part of it, but there's also risk involved, right? In many ways, because if you look at the law firm structure, it's very well, the data is very unstructured, right? We have a data fragmentation problem with law firms, especially large law firms. You have 30 offices, some subject to GDPR on the other side of the pond, some in the Asia, some in other regions. You're now trying to collect all that knowledge and put Copilot to sit on top of that knowledge. Now, not to mention that you still have to deal with ethical screens. You have legal holes. You have other restrictions. You have highly, classified, maybe you have ITAR. Maybe you have a defense contractor that's subject to different kind of rules and regulations. So my question is just usually, have you tested the system before you even get to that? Is your data ready to use Copilot before you even decide to purchase? Because what I'm seeing so far is that law firm data is not ready to be used by Copilot. DMS is ready. I think that's the, in a way. But then if you're using, opportunistic model and all your documents day one are public, unless you make them private, I'm afraid you're going to find a lot of, I have a list of dirty words. So I go through the list, like every time we have those, like, social security number, partner comms, bonus, confidential, eyes only, like whatever that list is, hundreds or whatever number of words, you run those words through your Copilot, get a small, license just for IT and for your trainers and small group of people, so you can control the exposure and identify those issues before you open up to the rest of the firm. I think that'll be my number one concern more than the ROI.
Yeah, that Microsoft has talked about that. Copilot will expose any shortcomings you may have in your control environment, right? It's real easy to ask a question. There's a lot of security by obscurity in enterprise businesses, not just law firms, but even, I spent 10 years at Bank of America, and I was in corporate audit for a little while, and it was amazing some of the holes that were present but never got taken advantage of because it would require a lot of savvy to uncover that the holes were there. Copilot takes that away, right? If there are, you can just ask the question, what is, XYZ that you shouldn't have access to. Copilot will go and find, and if you've got access to that resource, it's going to return the answer. Whereas, previously when you didn't have a mechanism to kind of search and have questions answered enterprise wide, it would be much more difficult to do. So that is absolutely a challenge. And another reason why, to your point, rolling it out incrementally makes sense in a very planned way, not just kind of a wholesale deployment. But, I think also like TCO is something that firms, and not just law firms, but businesses in general, don't properly account for. There is training, there is support. Both of those things are ongoing. They don't go away. As the tool enables new capabilities, people have to be trained on it. And what's the training cost? Not just the cost to deliver, but the opportunity cost for these $1,000 an hour attorneys because they have to be trained. So I don't know. Do you see that as well in terms of firms not properly accounting for that?
Yep, and it doesn't stop there. It also goes into mentoring phase of the attorneys, right? I think so. What happens, just like you usually combine a senior partner with a first or second year associate when they join and create this mentorship program. But now you introduce Copilot. So does that mean that you're going to have less time right? Do you think in the future, do you think the associates will spend less time with their partners in person, but they're going to depend on Copilot correcting them while they're drafting a memo, which is kind of my dream of future, that I open a motion to summary judgment and motion for summary judgment, and I start typing the first paragraph, and then Copilot says, don't waste your time. I found something similar. Here's a paragraph you want to insert. So that is going to be almost like coach or senior or experienced senior partner watching over your shoulder going like, no, that's not the right approach. Do this or do that. So I think you're going to see that kind of transfer switch happening from one-on-one training to more like online training, or I would say just-in-time training or real-time training. You're in the middle of a document, and then Copilot interrupts your,
Your workflow.
workflow. Exactly. So I think that will be interesting part. But I think going back to your original concern about I'm worried about the cycle of change. I think law firms are not subject to change culture. We don't see rapid changes. So traditional lawyer uses 5 or 6 applications. They learn it really well in depth. They will know every single menu. They can even use keyboards to pull up menus. They can do so much stuff. They become expert. And then when the Copilot comes in and suddenly Teams needs to be updated, there's an Outlook update coming up. They're going to get rid of all the COM add-ins. So we're going to see a lot of change around Copilot structure. So I think we're going to move the cheese, a lot of times on a almost like monthly basis, we're going to keep moving their cheese. Well, like you said, not to mention that these partners are charging $1,000 an hour. When I move their cheese, now they're going to spend another half hour every week, right, to learn, or every month to relearn everything that they learn. So that cultural shift, what Microsoft is, and not just by Microsoft, by the way, it's coming from Amazon, it's coming from Apple, it's coming from Google. They all big tech is pushing this rapid change cycle. And that used to be security related in the past, that clients will say, I want you to patch your systems within a week. That within a week or 2 months, actually started when I'm so old that I can remember those days. You better patch your system in 3 months. We're like, yeah, we can do it in a month. Suddenly, recently, I think our most recent security audit, they mandate 24-hour for high-risk security patch application, right, on your environment. So when you move to cloud and your cloud provider is taking care of all that maintenance part, so now it's coming back to you and saying, hey, you don't even have control over those changes. Like Teams old version, went out of, forced upgrade, went offline. So suddenly, for those that waited till end of March, April 1st, Fool's Day, thanks Microsoft, you have a new version of Teams coming out. So, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. I think we're going to see more and more these kind of changes when you move to cloud. You're going to lose that control over your version. And I think that's going to definitely impact the outcome, and it's going to force attorneys who are traditional, very slow to adapt, to be more adaptive, the more, and I think that's going to be probably the biggest, obstacle we're going to see. You can only lead them to water. You can't force them to drink, right? And if they don't want to change those 5 or 6 applications, they're happy with it. And then the minute somebody comes in and changes those, I don't think they're going to be quite happy. So.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And so InfoDash is built. It's a legal internet extranet platform. It is built to run exclusively in SharePoint Online. It can't run on prem because we need access to the Office graph. It's central to a lot of things we do. And part of our value proposition, I think, is to manage exactly what you just talked about. In the past, firms had control of when they deploy a service pack or a cumulative update or a new version of SharePoint. They no longer have that control. So if that rolls out and something breaks and they have a custom dev solution, for example, how are they going to manage that? Are they going to have somebody listening to the Microsoft updates and going, oh, yeah, something? No, they're not going to be that proactive. But we still get caught by surprise every once in a while because Microsoft's communications sometimes don't give us the level of detail that we need to properly assess impact, but we are listening. So yeah, that's a big part of our value proposition is good luck custom deving something to run in SharePoint Online and not having
Mhm.
something break on you, because it will. It's inevitable.
And I think the reverse is just like when you put a lot of eggs in Microsoft basket, and the fear is just you're going to lose some functionality and feature. If you don't do these kind of custom solutions, you're not going to be able to fill that 80-20% gap where Microsoft says, here's a solution for you. My partners will come in and fill the gap. So that those partners, like you said, is going to be the anchor, slowing us down, pulling us down when we try to move to the next version. Like imagine there's a new version of Copilot that's so critical for us to start gathering more details about our matter documents. And then I'm waiting for those 2 or 3 vendors to, and like you said, it may not be their fault. Maybe there's something disconnect along those lines. But I think I feel like Microsoft is going to keep pushing this agenda of um, follow their way or highway. Like I think there's going to be some kind of really, pressure approach that we're going to see coming up. So
Yeah, I mean, so it is already nearly impossible to stay on SharePoint on-prem, for example. I'll use that example because it's one I'm familiar with. So 2019, by all accounts, I don't think Microsoft has come out and publicly said this, but is going to be the last on-prem version, and it's still running. Last I heard, like 12 versions back of React and SharePoint framework. So like it is, you're stuck in a time warp
yeah.
if you're running on prem. But back to the AI thing, I had a debate with a friend of mine who owns about a 50 attorney law firm here in St. Louis, and when I was talking about the impact of AI on the industry as a whole, he's very savvy on the AI front, but he
Mhm.
seems to think that he's immune somehow from because he's smaller and more nimble. And my comment to him was, I don't care how big, because they only have 2 partners. Some of these big firms have thousands of partners, and but there's some fundamental impact to law firms, primarily around leverage. I think that is going. If that Goldman Sachs report is accurate, and I forget the number now, it was just under 50% of legal tasks can be automated. That means fewer. It's going to take fewer attorneys to complete the same amount of legal work. So unless you have an unlimited pipeline of new business, which I don't know anybody that has an unlimited pipeline, then it's going to impact your ratio of partners to attorneys, right? And that is going to
Definitely,
impact leverage, is
definitely,
it not?
definitely. It will, and I think the way I see it, it's interesting you mentioned that because I think you know larger competition will have deeper pockets to implement technology and push it out to users much more efficiently than smaller law firms. So I think I always have seen that law firms in a smaller scale, 50, 100 to maybe 500, 400, 400, 500 range, that range, less than 500. I think that's where we're going to see the best ROI for products like Copilot and generative AI, because now you can compete against your much larger competition without spending a fortune. But with that means that you need to be more nimble. Your data needs to be your content, your documents needs to be in a much better open space or architecture so that Copilot can go after, or it doesn't have to be Copilot, any other kind of product can go after that large collection. Hiding that behind a traditional proprietary DMS, platform is going to make things really hard for regardless of. And I think that's where I see the advantage. If you're larger competition with 1,000, 2,000, lawyers, it's like big Titanic, right? By the time they see the iceberg, it's too late. But smaller law firms, they see the Titanic behind. I mean, they see the iceberg behind Titanic, and they can make the course correction much faster. And I think that's where we're going to probably see smart ones will roll up their sleeves, get in there and start exploring, and the other part is like you need to start making names. If you're a regional law firm or a specialty law firm in one niche area, you need to start building that reputation, brand name, that you're out there, not just using technology, but to full extent, just like products like generative AI, so that you can start attracting more clients coming to you to get these things done, rather than going and paying much larger sums of money to a much larger law firm. So
Yeah, I agree with that, and I do think, and to his point, I agree that their ability to be nimble is a huge asset in this whole journey. But it is absolutely, they are not immune from impact here. It is going to impact their leverage. But to your point about document silos, let's touch on that a little bit, because this is a fun debate. Using SharePoint as a DMS. So I first heard rumblings of firms being interested in this when was it SharePoint 2007 came out, and there was the thought of, hey, I've already got this SharePoint infrastructure that I'm paying for, and I've got personnel to support. This is in the bigger law firm world. Why can't I use that to store my documents instead of paying iManager, NetDocs $1 million a year for that privilege? And a couple firms have tried it. There was one in the UK. I can't remember right now, but it went horribly bad. Bad. And I know of two here in the US that tried it, and they also went very bad. Now, have things gotten more accommodating or less in SharePoint Online? I think there's a little bit of both, right? I do feel like with SharePoint Online and Microsoft now managing the infrastructure, where law firms don't have to stand up, SharePoint farms that were so complicated. You got web front ends and database servers and central admin servers, and now that's all Microsoft's problem. But now you've got other problems to contend with, and that is getting data in and out of SharePoint Online. Large amounts of data is really hard. I'll give you an example. It's not SharePoint, but very close related product is Microsoft Dynamics. We're in the process of deploying Dynamics now. We used to have it years ago, then we went away from it. We're going back. But in order to upload the ILTA roster, which is 25,000 people, it takes like 14 hours or something in Dynamic. Now, our vendor, our partner is going to work on, but that's kind of the default. That's 25,000 records. That's nothing. That's like a 500 kilobyte spreadsheet. I don't even know if it's a full meg, right? So a very small amount of data, but there's a lot of steps that have, when you're using the API, it's not just like you're doing a bulk import into a SQL table, right? That happens very quickly. So that's one challenge I see, is getting the data in and out. Another challenge I see is the support model. You and I talked a little bit about that, that these firms, even the biggest firms in the world, are not Fortune 500. So how are they going to be able to get the requisite attention for something that's so important to their business? If that document management system goes down for an extended period of time, and SharePoint Online has had some outages, is that CIO going to keep his or her job? I don't know, but those are two big obstacles. There are others, but what do you think about that?
I've seen it. I heard it with my own eyes. I've seen it, that SharePoint DMS is a CIO job killer, period, right? And everything you said is accurate. With one small if condition, that if you're using meta-center code from GitHub that Microsoft developed. So to be frank, I'm kind of biased because I was working for Gibson Dunn, and Gibson Dunn was the outside counsel for Microsoft. We got invited to Redmond. We spent hours. One of these meetings, Nisham was in the room. We have Brad Smith, Nishan and other people. And then we start talking about, I don't know how it came on. I said, wouldn't it be great if we put our documents into this SharePoint blob or container that we can just do check in, check out, so we don't have to go with, a traditional DMS product? Because my whole career, since I started 28 years ago or whatever, I always wonder, why can we use a non-proprietary technology to store documents. And then I always had the idea of the best DMS is invisible DMS, right? In many ways. So it needs to be hidden behind, and it only comes up when you need it. So when we were talking about this, Nishan brought the office product managers. We spent 2-3 hours whiteboard. He took pictures. We went back and forth. Finally, they put the code together. They reached out to us. So we talked about marketing models. I really wanted them to sell the product. When they sell the product, they put the support behind it, right? But they decide to open up because they said that they use it for their CELA team, their in-house legal, department, over 1,000, lawyers. They've been using this, tool, and but they decide to leave it up to their partners to fill that gap, 20% gap when they reach that point. So I think so. What happens is that um, some vendors took that code and designed on top of it. And I think you see products in the market that do that. So our journey with the cloud started about 5 years, 6 years ago when I took over the job here. My first project is that move everything to cloud. And we had no idea that COVID was coming. Of course, who knew, right? So it's a totally black swan event that hit us. And then in the middle of COVID, about 2.5, 3 years ago, we moved to Epona, which is SharePoint based, DMS, but they put their wrapper around the code matter center. And then I think one part of the idea is that if something to happen, we still have the source code, right? I own the source code. I can actually, with some C# skills, I can actually maintain that code for another 3, 4, 5, whatever the years to come. So I'm not attached to a single proprietary vendor or a platform or solution. And I think that's where things start, we start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, that when you move documents, 5-6 million documents that we did, just like you said, we shut down everything, Friday noon, and then by Monday morning we had documents migrated. And of course, Microsoft, when you start over 5 million documents, they start throttling you, they start slowing your speed, and God forbid if any kind of hiccup happens, so you have to go back and do some iterative imports again. I mean, yes, it's not easy, but we spent 1 weekend, move everyone. And we've been using it actively since then. So not only that, we got rid of our network shares because we believe that network shares are prime target for hacking and phishing attempts. So we move our network shares to OneDrive. We move our DMS from iManage on-prem to, and hitting multiple birds, by the way. We didn't go from on-prem iManage to their cloud or NetDocuments or any other solution. We moved from on-prem, which was 9 point something at the end of its life cycle, directly to Epona. And now that we put all our, some of our eggs into that, then we start bringing Teams into that. We replace our phone system with Teams. We start using during pandemic for collaboration purposes. And we use that as a way to force that change on the attorney side. And they adopted. We only have, I think as of today, 2 or 3 desk phones. We have 300 users and only everybody is like fully adopted. So my point is that, and then we rolled out Dynamics last year, right, to seal the deal. So now we have a lot of eggs on Microsoft basket. And then, of course, Copilot comes, which we had no idea, maybe another black swan event. And then we were ready like this, because now my documents are not in just SharePoint, but they're also subject to, I can still apply. We use Purview to apply, legal holds or ethical screens, so I can secure my documents. I can do everything that I want needed for that, document collection to be more applicable to or more targeted to Copilot or similar kind of products. So my point is that if you're going to move SharePoint DMS, which is a great concept, I will not touch the code, pure Matter Center code, and use it that way. Like you said, it's not going to work because of support structure, lack of support, because of lack of upgrades. Like we're now working with multiple vendors, with Epona and Litera and others, to get rid of the COM add-ins, right? Which is Microsoft next prize for us, is to get rid of those add-ins loaded at the beginning. We're going to see a lot of those custom legal vendors looking into those kind of solutions right now to what to do with the I think it's called Outlook One, the next version of Outlook. And I feel like firm like ours who take that kind of jump with a vendor like Epona that provides support services, updates and upgrades and so on, are going to be able to ahead of the game. They actually recently, they have a cloud conference coming up next week. They actually recently implemented a new solution that you can right click and say ask Epona, very similar to ask Copilot. You can actually directly ask questions, directly tapping into Azure AI in addition to Copilot piece as well. So
Yeah, and I have a vested interest in SharePoint being a viable platform. Like it would make my product so much more valuable, and like
yeah,
conceptually
yeah,
it makes sense. Like again, putting your work product in scope for Copilot, for Azure AI search, for all of the tools, like that
yeah,
all makes sense. So a lot of people, I think, assume that I have some financial interest in this not happening. Like, no, it's the opposite. I want it to happen. It's
yeah,
just I see fundamental challenges with it, and I've been around long enough that I've seen firms try and fail. And I used to
yeah,
work at Microsoft support
yeah,
25 years ago, but I understand how things work over there, and I know how difficult it is to get somebody on the phone. Again, even if you have a premier, platinum support agreement, it is still really, really difficult. So
yeah.
if I can imagine a big law firm with SharePoint down and their
Hmm.
$1,500, $2,000 an hour attorneys can't get to
Yeah,
the work product that their clients need, and how just much pressure
yeah,
that would put. I wouldn't
yeah,
do it as a CIO. Now,
no,
for smaller firms, I do think it's much more viable, and I said
yeah,
that in the thread, and I've been pretty consistent about that. But
yeah,
um, yeah, I just see some fundamental challenges, but I want it to work because I had Joe Davis on, and we had the same conversation, and he talked about, well, just having co-authoring, for example.
yeah,
How
yeah.
great
Oh,
would that be? You
we
know?
love it, and it wasn't intentional. We found out that people, when I started, people were using email to attach, documents sent to each other, not even NRLs or links, right?
Hmm.
So suddenly, after we implement Epona, we've seen plummet in those, email exchanges going internally back and forth. So we figured out, we find out that they were co-authoring documents actually instead of emailing each other, and we didn't even provide instructions for it. It was almost like organic growth. But if you go back to the origins of how we have the traditional DMS, is that I think it goes back to late 1990s when the law firms moved from WordPerfect to Microsoft Word. And I remember we had word processing departments at Sherman and Sterling working on graveyard shift around the clock, taking Word documents coming from financial institutions or clients or banks and others, converting them to WordPerfect, sending it to their attorneys working, sending back. And that lasted at least a year because, again, law firms, innovation and productivity are two dirty words for most of the law firms. So when you innovate, I think the expectation just you're going to lower your, hourly, billable hours, and it's going to impact financial impact on your firm. So, but if you look at those late 1990s, Word did not have those functionality. It didn't have extensive metadata till they moved from doc to docx extension. Microsoft did not have capability to even compete against the traditional DMS, vendor market. But then when you look at last 5 years or so, 5, 6 years, we're seeing significant shift that gap that Microsoft left is narrowing. So it's such a narrow that if you're a small firm, you can even get away with word compare, versioning, check in, check out, I would say probably top 5 or 6 features of traditional DMS already built into Microsoft Word, Microsoft Office line of products. So I think it's almost ready to have a next generation DMS, most likely, right? I would like to see the next gen DMS to be more AI native DMS built from ground up, Because if you think about traditional DMS vendors in the market, they have to have backwards compatibility. Just like the financial, I mean, if you look at the top 100 AM law 100 or 200 law firms, they're using either Elite or Adorant. If you look at the same firms, they're using Net Documents I manage. So when you walk in that market, right, and say, hey, my name is Ted, I'm going to move you to SharePoint DMS, they're going to say, no, thank you, right? So because they don't see the value proposition on the table. But then I've done that journey. I've seen what's at the end of the tunnel, and it's not a train coming your way. It's actually a different world. So for me, if I can share that knowledge and inform the others that, yes, if you use the out-of-the-box Matter Center code, everything you say is 100% valid. And then also another part is like, even if you use Epona, a product like Epona, where you can get the support for your client, front end UX, you're still tied into Microsoft keeping their SharePoint platform up and running with the 6 nines or 7 nines, whatever the availability. But I think one comment that I heard came from one of our partners here. He said, hey, Chad, what's the big deal? Because 80%, 90% of our clients are using M365 and Microsoft platform. If our SharePoint platform goes down on the Microsoft side, most likely our clients will be in the same boat as well. They're not going to be able to function at that point. To be frank, yes, I know it's a bit risky for probably larger firms, but 2.5, 3 years, we haven't had a single outage on our SharePoint document library. We don't have a single ticket saying that I tried to access, my document, but looks like SharePoint is down, which is not the case if you host it on-prem. I'm talking about only SharePoint online with the high availability, and there are a lot of options for you to bring it to edge or do something from a BCDR perspective that even SharePoint goes down. You can copy those documents, because we do OneDrive as a virtual briefcase, that if you have certain documents active, you're trying to get onto airplane, going to court, or going to a place where you don't have access, you're going offline, you can take the briefcase with you, which it does, it replicates your documents through OneDrive to your local machine. And stuff like that exists in my mind, but I think, it all comes down, is it worth taking that risk? And how big is that risk, is this question.
Yeah, and I would really like to see this happen. It would really
Yeah.
make our product, and I do think that there is additional pressure now and additional logic behind why this should happen. Again, with just how far ahead Microsoft is with co-authoring than the DMS vendors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the traditional DMS vendors choke on that concept.
Yeah.
AI
Yeah.
and Copilot, search. There's a lot of reasons for this to happen, but I still think there are just fundamental challenges. Real quickly, one time it doesn't always have to be an outage that can cause you some serious problems. One time, I'm going back a few years, we broke versioning in some way in our tenant, and that ticket stayed open. We were partners, and we had a technical account manager. That ticket was open for over 90 days. It was so frustrating. And I forget the specific details, and I'm going back. This was pre-COVID. I'm going back a while. But that, experiences like that really hammered home for me just some of the challenges that you face. It may not be a complete outage. It may be a partial outage. It may be a site collection level issue. Just getting the attention that you need. If you're a big law firm and you call iManage or NetDocs with that stuff, you're going to get the attention you need. Are you going to get it with Microsoft? I don't know. It seems like a risk to me.
Well, I think we're not going to call Microsoft, right? I think we're going to go with Epona first. They have special partnership and back channel access to Microsoft level 3, level 4 engineering. So we'll go through them first. And then if there's a fundamental issue or some kind of server issue on their side, yes, you have to wait that issue to be resolved. But like I said, 2.5, 3 years, we haven't had that issue. But I think for us, clearly, Copilot was just the icing on the cake. Because right now, we don't let our users profile documents. They just draft the document, go file, save, top 4 or 5 matters show up, they pick the matter, save. So what we do in the backend is just like we have a matter profiling system maintained by marketing, KM, and library, so that we inject that metadata into documents, so that I can track the document through document lifecycle. So I can run questions like, show me all the closing sets we've done for a real estate transaction involving land use in the state of Wyoming, where the deal value was over $60 million, something along those lines. Used to take maybe 10-15 minutes to patch multiple reports, tie them together. I can do it with one single search screen today. And the value that I see is that we tie the matter lifecycle from intake, when it goes through conflict check, all the way, and we capture that data, and throughout the matter lifecycle we keep tapping into different, like when somebody does a motion, or if somebody's doing a financial transaction, if you're doing a closing or any kind of activity we can capture, we update our matter profiling system. So which means that your document management system, well, our document management system right now is dynamic and carrying that dynamic metadata. And I think that's critical for us because, as you can imagine, sometimes cases start as a bankruptcy, could turn into litigation or something else. But your DMS, your traditional DMS, still remembers that at the inception, profile of that matter. It doesn't remember how it got to that point. Yes, there are some systems that can come back and update that, but I think being able to have whole lifecycle, document lifecycle, mimicking or following the matter lifecycle, I found that to be the critical element of the future DMS, right? Not just the innovative solutions like Copilots and generative AIs. For me, I want to be able to not search the contents of the document alone or the profile of the document. I want to search the documents belong to a certain matter type, engagement or a case, right? Show me everything we've done involving this in this kind of thing during that time for this kind of value. That is not traditionally, well, that's not available through traditional DMS vendors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know it's so I equate my position on this topic to going to a car lot and the sales guy telling you not to buy that car, to go across the street and buy another car. Because again, and that's a real high level of trust. Like, hey, this dude has a financial incentive to sell me this car, and he's not. He's telling me to go across the street. So I feel like my position is pretty credible because it would help us if this were to happen. I want it to happen. I see real good reasons for it to happen. I just don't think it's ready to happen. And if and when we get there, I will be the first person screaming from the mountaintops. So we'll have to see. And I know we're running out of time here, but at some point.
The good news is just like talking about reaching that point is that today is my last day at Davis Graham Stops. I'm moving to Louis Roca as of next week, and that's my first project. Moved from iManage to Epona SharePoint DMS. And I think that's critical for the future of a AM200 law firm. And then I think it's going to change the way, not just the way attorneys interact, but it's going to also change our support staff, admin staff. I think there's a lot of focus around timekeepers and attorneys and their use of technologies like Copilot. We're not much paying attention to our support staff. And that low-hanging fruit, the repeated tasks that we do every day, now can be automated. So which means that we can be more nimble, we can be more responsive, we can respond to client requests and changes much more rapidly because we have this dynamic platform. We build a whole LPM running on Teams, and that got provisioned when Epona opens a new matter through Intap and Adrian overnight. It also spins off a Teams site. So now I have a dashboard, LPM dashboard, showing not just my documents, all the meetings, dockets, all the parties involved. And I think that's where I see maybe like a ecosystem, Microsoft ecosystem with a lot of eggs in that basket. So
I love it, man. I would love to see this happen.
I think Ilta, we can do hopefully a demo, of the whole site, because like I said, it's not a concept. It's we're using it today. and then don't mind sharing how we've done it.
Yeah,
So
let's definitely keep in touch as this
yeah,
happens. Is Louis Roca, are they AmLaw 200? You
200.
know?
Yeah, yeah,
They are okay.
yeah.
Well, if you get them across the goal line before ILTA 2025, I have to buy Joe a steak dinner. Joe Davis, we made that
Yeah,
bet on, but
yeah,
I'm happy to do it. I'll
yeah,
happily write the check because
um,
the benefits to InfoDash that sit on
yeah,
top of SharePoint Online and
mm,
Teams will
yeah,
far outweigh the cost of that dinner.
yeah.
So,
That makes sense.
yeah, I'm pulling for you. I hope it
Yeah,
happens. Let's stay in touch, and
we'll do,
you got to keep me updated on how this plays out.
we'll do. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, it was
Okay.
great. It was great talking to you. We'll
Yeah,
keep in touch.
yeah. Same
All
here.
right.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for listening to Legal Innovation Spotlight. If you found value in this chat, hit the subscribe button to be notified when we release new episodes. We'd also really appreciate it if you could take a moment to rate us and leave us a review wherever you're listening right now. Your feedback helps us provide you with top-notch content. Want to dive deeper into the world of legal innovation? Connect with us online at getinfo-.com, where you'll find additional resources and articles. You can also follow us on social media at getinfo- to stay updated on the latest news and insights in the field of legal tech and knowledge management. Once again, thank you for joining us today on Legal Innovation Spotlight, a fireside chat series hosted by InfoDash.